Good to go?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, we got four.
Okay, good. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for attending the 2021 Annual General Meeting of the Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society, Yukon Chapter. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Eric Val, and I sit as the president of the Yukon board for CPAWS, and also as vice president on the national board. I'm going to call the meeting to order now, and I'd like to open the meeting by acknowledging that we live and work on the traditional territory of the Kwantlen Dun First Nation and the Tonquetchin Tribal Council, and that as a conservation organization, we recognize that Yukon First Nations and Nunavut have stewarded their traditional lands and waters since time immemorial and to the present. Before making a few opening comments and remarks, we have some necessary business to do to start the meeting. First, we need a motion and a seconder to approve our agenda. And I'm hoping that the agenda is available for people to see.
Do we want to jump in and then give instructions? Oh, no, we don't even want to vote on it.
So if I could have just a motion from the floor on the agenda, unless there are things that people want to add, and then a seconder to approve it. Hopefully people are hearing me.
I'll move it, Eric. It's Sandy.
Thank you, Sandy. Sandy moves it. Can I have a seconder, please?
I can second it. It's Charlotte.
Thank you, Charlotte. And if there's no issues with the agenda, I'm not hearing any, we'll consider that approved. And now we also need a motion and the seconder for the minutes of our last AGM, which was held almost a year ago, June 18th, 2020.
I'll put it up on the screen. We're putting the minutes on the screen.
Should we put
That's all sure. Usually kind of walks through them.
okay, put the minutes on screen.
I think those are the 2019 ones.
Thanks, Eric.
Stand by, folks. We're just getting organized here.
We did send out the minutes. Adele did link out to the minutes for people earlier as well.
I can put them okay.
Good to see everyone here. Yeah, that was, it just says the wrong year.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So we have a correction for the minutes.
So now that we've corrected the date from our last AGM, which was June 18th, 2020, could I have somebody pass a motion to approve those minutes? It's a necessary thing we have to do.
I can make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Jill. And then a seconder, please.
I can second it, Eric.
Thanks, Joel. Great. And hearing no opposition, I'll consider the minutes of last year's AGM approved. So with that business out of the way, let me start by saying that while I regret that we could not hold this meeting in person, I am grateful, and I'll put into parentheses because when I wrote this, of course, we weren't facing what we are now, and that's the current outbreak. But I am grateful overall for the progress that we have made as Yukoners in addressing the challenges that COVID-19 has presented over the last year. I believe that the open wild spaces of the Yukon have helped us get through these difficult times. However, we're not out of the woods yet. And I think that along with other Canadians, we could start, but I think that we can start to see some light at the end of the tunnel. I think it is fair to say that this year also continued to show us the dark side of our colonial past and the ongoing oppression that Indigenous and racialized peoples in Canada face daily. CPAWS Yukon has and will continue to learn and reflect on what this means for us and our relationships, and to identify the commitments and actions that we must take to make reconciliation and to be a more just, equitable, diverse, and inclusive organization. In collaboration with the Yukon Conservation Society, we have prepared a document that clearly describes our commitment to reconciliation by pledging what actions we will take and how we will hold ourselves accountable for our promises. We will present our commitment to reconciliation a little later this evening. Also, I'm happy to report that this year we have prepared our strategic plan for 2021 and to 2024. The plan builds on the progress we've made in the previous 5 years and lays out a path forward to help us plan our work. I'm equally thrilled to report that chapter finances for 2021 to 2022 are solid and provide us the resources to continue doing our work. This is primarily due to the excellent relations that Chris has fostered with the foundations that support our campaigns and projects, the great work consistently done by all staff, both with the communities and in the field, and Judith's careful management of the budgets and administration of the office. Chris and later staff will summarize the conservation work that has been completed over the last year. In conclusion, this is a short opening comment and remarks. I would like to say what a privilege and honor it has been over the last 6 years to chair this wonderfully committed and increasingly diverse board. I will be stepping down from the position after this meeting and hope to continue on the board should the membership agree. This has been a team effort that built on many years of dedicated service of the two Jills, Jill Pagman and Jim Cracknell, on Chris's leadership and ability to attract and retain such qualified and committed staff. And on the rest of the board, our long timers, Jill, Karen, Joel, and Sandy, and the newer generation, Heather, Matisse, Charlotte, and Bobby Rose. I especially want to thank Karen for all her years of service as she steps down also from the board this year to graciously provide space for a new member to join. Now I'm going to ask Chris to give us his annual executive director's report.
Thank you, Eric. Last year when I did my ED report, I just eaten a muesli bar and couldn't stop coughing throughout. So this year's can only go better. Well, hi everyone. It's really a privilege to be here again to speak to you all. For those who don't know me, my name is Chris Ryder, and I've been the executive director here at CPAWS Yukon for the past 5 years, which is incredible to think about how quickly that time has gone. It genuinely feels like yesterday when I first started with the organization. I think it's important to also acknowledge that we're on the traditional territory of Kwonlen Dun First Nation and to Quechan Council. For me, as an immigrant to Canada, I feel particularly privileged to be able to spend my time in such an incredible place. And I'm incredibly grateful to be here. It's been a weird year, I think is the best thing to say. It's been in some ways a really positive year, and in other ways it's been hugely challenging. So it's kind of hard to find the right tone when doing this update for everyone this year. But I think I want to talk about really the things that are most positive. The things I want to touch on right now are staff resiliency that we've had through what has been probably the most difficult year for almost all of us. It's just been such a challenging year, and our whole team has adapted and moved with all of the changes and been willing to accept that we're now changing from being in different places to now being able to come back in the office, and now we have to be in different places again. And it's just been this never-ending cycle, and just to have been able to work with such an incredible group of people who've just been like, okay, I guess we're doing this now, and have never once, I don't want to say never once struggled, but have always just come through with a spirit of resiliency that is absolutely inspiring to me. As part of that, we were actually able to do 2 on-the-land trips, one with Trundek-Wichan First Nation and one with Nutcha-Nyak-Dun First Nation into the Beaver River watershed. And those 2 trips, I think, were just in doubt when we last met. And the fact that our team has been able to work with both communities and not only make those 2 trips happen, but make them happen in a way that has just been incredibly meaningful to everyone. One of the things that happened right before the trip that was happening with Nutcha-Nyak-Dun, we had a guide who had been working with us for several years. He was a guide, a filmmaker, and a good friend of our organization who had just come up from Vancouver. And 2 days before the trip was meant to take place, we found out that he had been exposed to someone who had been diagnosed with COVID-19. And it was one of those things that was just like, we're about to hit the river. We're about to have the team travel up to Mayo. And then all of a sudden we got hit with this just shocking news. And it was hard. It was just the nightmare scenario for us to suddenly have to deal with that. And yet again, just I want to acknowledge the work that Randy and Jyoti and Anne and everyone who's been involved in that did to make that trip still happen and make that trip still be a success. And then when everyone got back to Mayo, they were met with a flotilla of trucks parading them in. And just another one of those times when against the odds, incredible things happened. Another highlight this year for me is on the Arctic Refuge campaign. In December 2019, we set out to Toronto, Malcolm, myself, as well as Liz, the Caribou coordinator for Wetlands, Cheryl, Charlie, and oh, I've just totally gone blank.
Really?
Sorry?
Lower?
No, Bobby Rose, your cousin.
Geraldine Blake.
Geraldine.
Oh my God, at least I'm not choking on a muesli bar. And Geraldine and I, we all traveled to Toronto to meet with the banks. And at that point, we kind of thought, if we can convince one bank to commit to not funding the Arctic Refuge in the next couple of years, we'll have done well. It took the US organizations 2 years before they got their first bank. So we thought, yeah, we'll be doing well if we can get one bank in the next year. By the end of 2020, we had all 5 major Canadian banks had committed to never funding drilling in the Arctic Refuge. And that was down to this team's effort together with Wetlands. The work we've done in terms of public messaging has just been incredible as well. I look at the mineral development strategy, it's been amazing. And then I look at the election polling we did. For those of you who don't know, we commissioned data pad systems together with the Yukon Conservation Society during the recent election to ask Yukoners some questions about how they felt about the environment. And the results were outstanding. We found that 78% of Yukoners support very strong conservation targets in the Yukon. What was most interesting was the fact that nearly half of all Yukoners actually think we should be doing more here in the Yukon than the rest of Canada is doing. And that was just so inspiring to see. The last thing I want to quickly speak to is the work we've been doing on our reconciliation commitment. It's been a hugely challenging process to move ourselves in a way that we're committing to something that we feel ready to commit, that we've done the work to commit, and that we feel where we can make meaningful change. And I think we genuinely succeeded with that. And we're gonna have a lot more conversation about that coming up. But I really just want to acknowledge the work that our staff and our board all put into that, as well as Jared Gurney and Caitlin from the Yukon Conservation Society, who have just been incredible, both incredible people to work with. I want to acknowledge all of our staff, Randy, Jyoti, Judith, Malcolm, Adil, Megan, Asad, and Preet. All of you are just so inspiring. It's just truly a privilege that I get to come and work with you every day. There's 2 last things I want to talk about. The first one is every year when I do this update, I really enjoy using this as a little bit of a platform to recognize some of the people outside of our organization who've made a big difference to the work of CPAWS and generally to the cause. This year, I'm actually not going to recognize any people because I want to recognize some companies or at least some businesses. The first one and the main one I want to recognize is Canadian River Expeditions and Nahani River Adventures, specifically Joel and Dana, the two owners of that business. Throughout the pandemic, even as their business has been suffering, they have never hesitated to support the work we're doing. Last year, when we were ready to do a fundraiser, they were willing to donate a paddling trip in the Peel River watershed. They helped us with fundraising. They donated equipment, and they even made financial donations, even in the midst of a pandemic that decimated the tourism industry and tore apart their business. And that was not necessary. It was not expected, but it's just the people that they are and the ethos of their business. And so I really wanted to acknowledge that. The other folks I wanted to acknowledge is that Polarity Brewing, who agreed to host our fundraiser in March 2019. It was going to be their opening event of their brand new brewery, and it was going to be an incredible event. It got postponed by 2 weeks, and in the 2 weeks between when it was meant to happen and when the new scheduled date was, the pandemic hit, and we still haven't been able to hold that event. Despite the fact that they're growing and doing really well and now really busy, they've always remained committed to hosting that event and have promised to work with us to host that whenever it is safe. Obviously with the latest outbreak, we're going to be pausing that a little bit longer, but I really look forward to being able to work with them for that fundraising event in the near future. So the last thing I want to speak about is two of our board members. The first person I want to acknowledge is Karen Mckenna. Karen has been with the board for the past, I believe, 10 years or more, Karen. And in the 5 years that I've been with the organization, I have come to value Karen's wisdom and her quiet way of being so immensely. Karen is just always insightful, and it's been just such a privilege to get to know you, Karen, and to have you as our vice president. I was disappointed to learn that you're stepping down, but I also understand the reasons why, and I'm grateful that you're helping make space for new board members. I'm going to grab some. Karen, you're not here, you can't be here in person, but we got you this print from Stephanie Ryan just to say thank you for everything that you've done for our board. And this is from the team here. So thank you, Karen, for the last 10 years of just being an incredible part of CPAWS Yukon.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure that I deserve all the accolades, but I really have appreciated being on the board of CPAWS, and I will definitely miss it.
I also wanted to take a moment to recognize Eric Val. Eric has been the board president from the moment that I started with the organization. And in that time, Eric has been someone who has always been available for phone calls, has been there for advice, and just I can't speak more highly of the contribution of Eric and how much I've valued everything Eric has done for the organization, but also for me as a friend and a mentor, and just an incredible person to know. Eric has decided that this year is his last year as president. after 6 years as president of the organization, and the hours and hours and hours that he's put in on top of our monthly board meetings, basically just helping me work through so many different issues. It's just been something I'm so grateful for. And Eric, thank you. And a little bit of something again from the team, just to say thank you for another Steph Ryan, because we love Steph Ryan around here. To say
Well,
thank you
you
so
very much. Yeah, do appreciate it.
And I should have put my mask on for that.
Thank you, everybody.
With that, that's the end of my update. Thank you so much. We really could not have had any of the success we've had without the people who are tuning in today. We're a member-based organization. Our strength comes from our members and the people we work with. Without you, we'd just be a bunch of people yelling at clouds. So thank you so much. I look forward to talking with you all in the near future.
So
We're going to introduce and then Anne will speak.
thank you, Chris. As Chris mentioned, there's a lot of work that went into preparing this reconciliation commitment, and it is a commitment. And as you'll see, there are identified actions that we intend to take, and we intend to be held accountable for them. I'd like to ask Anne if you could lead us through the review. Anne is one of a number of people who was very much involved in the drafting and reviewing the reconciliation statement and commitment. And maybe you can lead us in the review of what we've created, Anne.
All right, thanks, Eric and Chris. Zenu Sothan, Namis Uzi, Waders Yukon Zunindi, Selkirk First Nation, Pele Crossing, Inye, Seki Hanjat. Good day. My name is Ann Meese, and I live in Waders, Yukon, and I'm Crow from the Crow clan of the Selkirk First Nation in Pele Crossing. So yeah, I'm honored to be here today to talk about reconciliation, and particularly within the Yukon, CPAWS Yukon setting, which is a self-proclaimed settler society. And although we have a diverse staff, we are still very much a settler organization. But that's changing. And it's attributed to a lot of what Chris had just said, but it also goes down to some of the action that Jody Overdoing and I did in 2019. We went to Vancouver and we attended some reconciliation training that was offered to us through Trek. And they had an amazing facilitator by the name of Jada Pape, who is Coast Salish. Anyway, we were blown away by the information that we got during the training, and we took it also with Mike Walton of YCS. But anyway, when Jody and I came back, we wondered what we were going to do with this information, and how are we going to share it and express all of this newfound knowledge that we had. So what we did was create a 5-module workshop. Initially, it was just for staff, and it was geared towards reconciliation. So in the workshop, we included learning about oneself as a staff member, learning about Yukon First Nation history. We kept it Yukon specific, and learning about dominant culture. So we combined these 3 areas together to better understand how to negotiate unexpected biases that we all seem to harbor. So through this workshop, the hope was that some of these biases would become evident to oneself. Now we call the workshop Getting Ready for Reconciliation. And that is because we felt that reconciliation is only just beginning. And we see that more so now with the discovery of the 215 children, which has now risen over 535 in the last couple of days. So these children never made it home from the residential schools. So having this knowledge is much more important at this moment in time. I'd say that our approach towards working alongside First Nation people has been reinforced by offering these workshops, and we also offered it to our board. And the hope was that we would gain a better understanding of how the processes of colonization still have residual effects today in 2021. So when we see communities struggling, we can maybe better understand why and work towards building stronger relationships with the First Nation people we work with. Because that history that we don't talk about goes back at least 150 years of residential schools, which affected over 150,000 First Nation people, mainly First Nation people, because only status Indian children and youth were the target of these residential schools, which were government funded, but church run institutions. So in 2008, the Reconciliation Commission came out with 94 recommendations on how to address this. And I think the training or the workshops that we offer in-house have been beneficial in understanding, a lot of the struggles that we see and maybe don't quite understand. And in the Yukon, it's going to get a little bit tougher because we had quite a few residential schools in the Yukon. Across Canada, there was upwards of 130. And one of our biggest, most destructive residential schools in the Yukon was the Chutla Residential School, which was built in Carcross and was opened in 1911. So between 1911 and 1968, every student, every Yukon First Nation youth attended that school. And most of them were hundreds of miles away from any place they would call home. And in a lot of instances, they spent upwards of 10 years in these schools. And a lot of them didn't go back home for various reasons. While they were in these confines of these institutions, they suffered, mental, physical, sexual, and spiritual abuse. And what we see today is the residual effects of that. But within our organization, I'm really honored to say that we're taking steps towards understanding that a little better, because we do work quite closely with Yukon First Nation people. So it's only to our benefit that we adopt this concept of reconciliation. And so, yeah, in that, I'd like to read this quote. It's by, and this happened when all of the news of the bodies that were found. Sandali Gid of the Haida Gwaii said, reconciliation means that you had a good relationship to begin with, and then you're reconciling the relationship. And this is meant in particular with the Canadian government, which she says that the relationship has never been good. So as a self-proclaimed part of a settler organization, you know, when people look towards us, you know, I hope that they can see the steps that we've taken to address these situations that are very difficult to work through. And so I would just like to thank all the staff and all of the board for making my job easy and being able to do what I need to do so that we're not left in the dark about these situations. We're as truthful as we can to understand what it needs to get us through these situations. So in that, I'd just like to say, enjoy the AGM. It's an awesome place to be, and it's a safe place. The cultural safety within this organization has made everything easy or messy chill.
Thank you, and that was a wonderful backgrounder and introduction to what we're going to do now, and that is that a number of us are going to read in sequence the commitment that as an organization we've made. And so I'll start with that. So this is being read verbatim. It's the CPAWS Yukon Commitment on Reconciliation. It's dated the May 31st, 2021. Reconciliation is about balance and healing between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples, including nonprofit organizations. We are an environmental organization that is settler founded and has a staff and board that remains mostly settler. Our ways of operating have been and are currently influenced by the norms and customs that have been forcibly imposed since European colonization of Canada. This is important to recognize as it carries specific responsibilities in our path towards reconciliation. It is our desire and our obligation to reconcile the colonial past with the present and into the future. CPAWS Yukon acknowledges the responsibility to support First Nations and Inuvialuit to help safeguard the land, water, and air for future generations. We commit to specific actions to help with our path towards reconciliation. Though we acknowledge that we will not be the ones to determine if they were effective. We recognize that we are in the early stages of an important journey. And for this reason, this is a living document and it will continue to evolve as we learn. So is
Jody is next. I believe.
I think she just left. She's not on the meeting.
So I can just start talking? You don't need to
Yep.
switch anything? Okay, thanks. We pledge to follow a path towards reconciliation, to learn from, be accountable for any mistakes that we make and have made. We will work to reinforce and expand positive efforts and approaches. Listen. We pledge to be true partners with Yukon First Nations, Transboundary First Nations, and other Indigenous peoples as we seek to maintain species and places that shelter and provide for those species. We pledge to continue to prioritize building and stewarding relationships with First Nations and Inuvialuit communities, citizens, and governments. We recognize the responsibilities that come with these relationships and the trust that trust is difficult to earn but easily broken. We pledge to recognize the history of colonialism that exists within conservation and environmental management and take action to ensure that it does not continue. We pledge to create awareness about the structures that were designed to foster and uphold colonialism, such as the doctrine of discovery and terra nullius. It is helpful that these ideas have been renounced both nationally and internationally, in particular by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission through UNDRIP, though the concepts tied to them are still used today and impede the path to reconciliation. And we pledge to create awareness about how the environmental sector can support the abolishment of colonialism.
A key part of reconciliation is education and putting our learning into action. We will educate ourselves on First Nation histories, values, and governance. This includes how they've been affected by Canadian federal, provincial, territorial, and municipal government actions and legislation, such as the Indian Act and the residential school system. We will be as specific as possible when working with Yukon First Nations, Transboundary Nations, and Inuvialuit by referring to their specific name and, where appropriate, permitted, and encouraged, the place names they choose. Through our education and learning, we will work to become better allies to First Nations and Inuvialuit communities, governments, and citizens. We will incorporate the two worldviews, which includes traditional knowledge and scientific knowledge or Western knowledge, into our daily work, and in particular when working with communities. We will acknowledge and respect that every Indigenous community has different worldviews, governance structures, spiritual and cultural practices.
We will reflect on how past and current conservation approaches have kept and may keep colonial or dominant views in place, both deliberately or unintentionally. For example, the removal of First Nation lands for the creation of parks, the existing policies and legislations which were created at the expense of First Nations, such as free entry staking, the prioritization of land for non-Indigenous residents and users, and restrictive hunting and fishing regulations, and the belief that traditional knowledge is only authentic when proven by Western science and knowledge systems. We will use this education and reflection towards Yukon and Transboundary First Nations and Inuvialuit communities we work with to do our best to stop the continuation of these harms and seek new, transparent, respectful, and collaborative approaches. We will be conscious of our own biases and actively work to challenge them in order to avoid having them negatively impact our working relationships.
We will commit to decision-making. We will follow the principles of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, such as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission Call 43 and 52, and Articles 19, 29, and 32 of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. We will always acknowledge that First Nations have the right of self-determination to make decisions for themselves and endorse the need for free, prior, and informed consent. For example, we will advocate for changes in the Yukon socioeconomic impact assessment process and support Indigenous land use planning in order to facilitate free, prior, and informed consent. We will also respect the right of Yukon First Nations who have not signed a modern treaty to define their own assessment processes. We acknowledge that First Nation governments have the right to determine the best use of their own lands and water.
We recognize the critical value of Indigenous knowledge systems and commit to respecting this knowledge on its own terms, alongside the concepts of Western science and Western knowledge. Furthermore, we recognize that both systems are unique and of equal value, and that Western knowledge systems should not be prioritized over Indigenous knowledge systems. We will follow the principles and protocols of First Nations and Inuvialuit, where it relates to Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous knowledge holders. This includes ownership, control, access, and position, and we recognize that protocols differ. We will create a guidebook that employees on reconciliation, and will provide avenues to access in-house workshops and provide the tools to help people towards reconciliation. We will also support and seek training and education for our staff and boards from outside our organizations.
We will commit, oops, oh yeah, there we go. We will commit to amplifying First Nations and Inuvialuit voices. We will always be respectful of traditional landowners in our public communications. We do not represent the views or perspectives of First Nations or Inuvialuit people, and we do not present ourselves as an authority for their positions on anything. We will only ever speak for our own organization. We do not speak for First Nations or the Inuvialuit people. And we will use our platform to allow space for First Nations and Inuvialuit citizens to share their own stories, perspectives, and views.
We will commit to being held accountable to our promises. The board and staff of our organization will regularly review and, when necessary, revise this document. We will keep the community informed of our work to meet these commitments by including a progress update as a regular part of the annual reporting that we complete for the public.
We are still far from reconciliation, and we acknowledge the fact that it is ultimately not for us to decide what is considered true reconciliation. Understanding the damage done through past and existing colonial institutions and practices, there is still much to learn and much healing to be done. We recognize that this commitment is just a step in our ongoing journey. With this work, we hope we can play a small role towards reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, and we will play this role with humility, respect, and with hope for a better tomorrow. Signed, all of us at CPAWS Yukon. Thank you everyone for being with us as we read that out. This is a commitment that we are making publicly, and we hope people will hold us to this commitment because these words are important and they carry weight. Before I hand back to Eric, again, I just want to acknowledge the role of Jared Gurney and Caitlin from the Yukon Conservation Society in the drafting of this document. But more than that, we actually started this process in terms of writing this document because Jared was the one that suggested it to us, that we work on this together. And so without Jared, this would not have been something that we pulled together. I'm proud to stand by, and I look forward to seeing other organizations, including Yukon Conservation Society, signing something similar in the very near future. We also are making this document available for other organizations to use and adapt as they see fit. We feel that this is an important part of that process, and again, that was the intent from which Jared came at it. I will ask that if anyone is sharing this with another organization, that they ask that organization to take this as seriously as we are, because the one thing I do not want to do is for us to be starting a process of empty commitments. This document has real action in there, and we must follow through. So thank you to our board for supporting and helping with this document. Thank you to Anne and Jyoti for being so incredible as we worked through this. And thank you to everyone else who's played a role, large or small, in the history of the organization that led us to this point and to where we're at now. Ganeshish, Masicho, Trinithan, thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and I'll just reiterate thanks to everybody who was involved in drafting and reviewing this commitment. It took quite a bit of time, but with that time, we created a very strong document which we can all support. So thank you, everybody. So the next item is that we're going to get Adil to describe how we're going to vote when the election of our board directors comes up. And after Adil does that description, Judith is going to review the financial updates. So Adil.
Thanks, Eric. Hi, everyone. I'm Adil. I'm the communications coordinator. I think I know everyone here. I am just going to do a quick walkthrough on how to vote. If you click on the participants button in the bottom, if you just hover your mouse over, you'll see an icon that says participants. If you click on that, you should get a list of everyone who's here in the meeting. And right below that, you should be able to see two symbols. One is a green check mark, and one is a red cross for no. And if you have, I think, the updated version of Zoom, if you click on reactions, so instead of participants, if you click on reactions, they're also available there. And so, yeah, throughout the rest of the AGM, when we ask for approval on certain things like the budget or the finances, yeah, if you could use the green check or the red X as your vote for yes or no vote for abstain, that would help us. And it shows up beside your name, so we can also see if you're a member who's voting. Yeah. So I think we're going to do a little test just to make sure everyone gets it. And that test is the question. Doing everything. Yeah. Are you a current member of CPAWS Yukon? And then if you could vote with a green check or a red X, and if you're not sure, you don't. I would actually still like for you to use one of the green or the red X or the green check mark just to make sure that we know that you know how to vote. And Judith can see the results and keep track. Sweet, thank you. And over to some finances from Judith.
Hang on, my thing's not working.
Oh.
Hi, this is Heather, everyone. I checked on the reactions, but it doesn't show up as a check mark beside my name. Oh, I just didn't push hard enough. All good.
You can see it.
Okay. I guess I can take my mask off for this part. Hello, everyone. For those of you who I haven't met in person, my name is Judith, and I'm the operations manager at CPAWS Yukon here. I just put in the chat where you can find the financial statements that I will present right now. And the same link also includes a PDF version of the budget for this fiscal year. Just because the shared screen is always quite small font and hard to read. So if you want to scroll through it and read it a bit easier, then you can find them there. And thank you, Adil, for the statements. We can scroll down to page number 5. I think it is, yeah, the statement of operations. So this is the main page for the audited statements, and it always compares the fiscal year that we just closed. So it closed on March 31st, 2021 to the year before. And I guess before I start talking about what you see here, I just want to acknowledge that our treasurer, Wendy Morrison, is unable to be at the meeting this evening. She was able to review the financial statements last week. And my report includes some of Wendy's notes. So just so everybody knows, the treasurer has seen the statements. So last year at this time, when we had our AGM, we presented a budget that we were quite unsure about because we were not sure yet how COVID, well, if and how it would affect our financial position. We're happy to say that we were successful in our fundraising efforts in this past fiscal year and closed in a good position once again. The budget that we presented at the last AGM was a balanced budget. Even at that time, we already knew that some of the campaign activities might not take place, but we kept them in the budget just to make sure that we had the revenues available in case we were able to complete those campaign activities at a later stage. In the end, we had fewer community visits. We were unable to travel outside of the territory, and we did not host any in-person campaign or fundraising events the way we planned to. That means that most of our expenses in the fiscal year were on staff wages and operational expenses. So those are like to keep our office going, including the office building. And our campaign expenses were lower than budgeted. So if you look at the revenues in the statements, you see that most of our revenue is made up out of grants. So those are foundation grants. It was pretty similar, the grant amounts from this past fiscal year as the year before. You'll see a large jump in the other grants and contribution agreements. That is mostly due to the fact that we applied for the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy from the Government of Canada that was initiated due to the pandemic. So that was $135,000 out of that 204 or 205,000 that you see there. And we also applied for a lot more government funding from Yukon government this past fiscal year. And that allowed us to go on 2 on-the-land trips, one with NND and one with TH, as Chris mentioned in his report. And it also enabled us to start our digital archiving project. So that explains the large jump in that, other grants revenue. You'll see merchandise sales took a big jump or big dive. Most of our merchandise sales are done at the Fireweed Market, and we were unable to go there last year. So that explains that. All in all, we were able to raise about $50,000 more in revenues than we had budgeted for. And again, that is due to the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy. And due to that, our revenues were a bit higher than they were the year before. Our expenses are quite similar to last year. I'm not sure what you're seeing now, but they're about $30,000 more in our past fiscal year than the year before. You'll see that there's quite a jump in salaries and benefit expenses. We were able to extend Megan's contract. He's currently our conservation coordinator, but started as our conservation intern last summer. We were able to extend her contract after September and then move her into this new position. So that was an increased wage expense. And then for the digital archiving project that I just mentioned, we were able to hire Assad, which of course also means an increase in wages paid just because there were new staff positions created. And Assad's position is a term position for this project only. Other things that jump out is that travel was a lot lower in expenses this past year due to the thing that everybody knows. And special events expenses were a lot lower also due to the pandemic, of course. Other than that, there are no big things. Other than you'll see the interest on long-term debt was a lot lower in the expense as well than the year before and other years before that. And that is thanks to the fact that we paid off our mortgage this past fiscal year. So no more interest expense was accumulated on that. So at the very bottom, you see that there is a excess of revenues over expenses of $123,000, which sounds like a lot. Keep in mind again that that is due to the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy. We applied for that last year because we were unsure about our finances. And even though we didn't need to use a lot of that revenue in this past fiscal year, it really sets us up in a good position in this current fiscal year. So we're off to a good start. And it also gives us not only some security in this fiscal year, but some of it might be moved to future fiscal years. So that goes into our reserve fund. And one of the goals that CPAWS Yukon set ourselves a few years ago is to build up our reserve fund to a minimum of 3 months of operating expenses, to a maximum of 6 months of operating expenses. It's good practice for nonprofits to have a unrestricted cash available just in case grant money falls through in the next fiscal year or the year after, that we don't have to close our organization right away, but that we have the time to hopefully bridge some of the expenses while we look for new grant money. So that is still something that we are working on. And as Wendy noted in the report that she sent to me, is that the fact that we now fully own our office building is, as she calls it, a landmark year for our organization. And CPAWS National has also completed the payout of all amounts owed to our organization as part of the building purchase agreement from 2016. It's a very complicated agreement, but I can give you more information if you would like to, just not as part of this meeting, preferably. So it means that we can now transition to a new chapter for our organization. And part of that is looking to invest our money to grow that reserve fund so we have the 3 to 6 months operating expenses available. And another goal for our investment is to look and find a new office space to house our staff and our office. So those are two things that we will use the reserve fund for in the years to come. And then as a little side note, some of you might have been at the special general meeting that we held in October of 2020, where we asked the membership to approve a motion for the board to borrow against or to sell the office building that we currently own, to then move those assets to a new office building for us. So that is a project that we're still working on, and we hope to have a more exciting update for you in the next fiscal year, let's say that. Then to close off, as Wendy, our treasurer, said, she's happy to present the financials of an organization in good financial position. And we can take advantage of opportunities moving forward just because we are in a good place as a nonprofit. And although this is not an official motion, Wendy, as a treasurer, recommends the membership to approve the financial statements as presented here this evening. I'm happy to ask any questions before we move to the motion.
If there are no further questions of Judith, then could we have somebody pass the motion to approve the financials of last year?
I move to approve the financials of last year. That's Heather.
And thank you, Heather. And I will second that. Okay, now everybody can vote according to the motion to approve last year's financials.
Okay.
Don't see anyone opposed, so happy to hear that. Thank you. So then the next financial part to present during this meeting is the budget for the fiscal year that we're currently in. Thank you, Adil. It's extremely small. Our revenues are broken down per grant. The foundation grants are listed first, and there are a few government grants listed a little bit lower down. And we have everything broken down per campaign area. Sorry. And then we have one Government of Canada grant, the Canada Summer Jobs, as well as some other revenue sources, which are individual donations, special events, and merchandise sales. It all adds up to $573,000. Then we have, of course, always money that we defer from past fiscal years, so that's close to $200,000. We are using some of that surplus money that I talked about that showed as a surplus in the audited statements. And then just due to the grant cycles that never line up with our own fiscal year, we always defer money to the next fiscal year as well. So all of that comes to a total revenue amount of just under $690,000 for this fiscal year, which is very much in line with last year's budget. And of all those revenues, we have already secured about $580,000. Some grants we have already signed agreements with parties, and other grants we have applied to, or we have verbal commitments that we will be able to apply for those amounts. And those are all from funders who we have been working with for multiple years. So those verbal commitments really mean a lot, and we can definitely count on those. And then together with the deferred revenue and the surplus funds that we have available, puts us in a great place in this first quarter of the fiscal year. So I feel really good about presenting this budget to the membership. Then if you scroll down to expenses, Adele, thank you. All our staff positions are listed there. You might see a new position there that we call the communications intern. We have not hired for this position yet, but we hope to hire a student part-time to assist Adil with some of the social media work that Adil does, so Adil can focus on more strategic communication tasks. And it also gives the students an opportunity to get some real life or real work experience in the real world, I guess. You'll see again that the program expenses are higher in this budget than what you saw in expenses in the audited statements. Again, we budget for a normal year and we'll do whatever we can. We were very optimistic until last year that this summer would be better with events and on-the-land trips. We'll see how it plays out. But as last year, we do our best and try to be creative so we can deliver on the campaigns. Sorry. Yeah, I think that's all I want to say for that part. And then as every year in late summer or September, I always start working on the budget for the next fiscal year to give ourselves time and plan ahead. So next year around this time, we're in a similar secure position for our budget. And I also like to look 2 to 3 years ahead just to see how we can plan for that. And all of that is, of course, to keep working on our campaigns and the level that is required, and to continue the fiscal health of our organization. And then I guess what I sort of skipped, but the total expenses are also $690,000. So we have a balanced budget here. And again, the expenses are in line with the budget that we presented last year. As mentioned, the audited statements show a little bit lower expenses due to COVID, but we hope to turn that around this year. So that's all I wanted to say about this year's budget. Again, happy to answer any questions before I ask someone to move the motion to accept the budget or approve the budget.
So if there are no questions of Judith, could I have a motion from the floor to approve this fiscal year's budget?
Oh, looks like Joel is.
Thank you, Joel.
And I'm happy to second that.
Thank you, Jill. And let's the membership take a vote, please.
I admit, I'm still not quite sure how to do this.
Well, write your vote down, Jill. It's good.
Hold the what down?
I can just, I have
Just
your.
add me. Okay, thanks.
Okay, great. Seeing no opposition, we'll consider the motion approved.
Thank you. And then I have one last item that I will need a vote on. Can you scroll down, please? So the past few years, we have worked with McKay & Associates, who have been our auditor for our finances for the last, I'm actually not too sure how many numbers of years. It's always easy working with them. They know our finances. This year, it was very smooth from the first draft to today was less than a week. And just because they know our finances so well, the first draft is basically a final version as well. So based on my experience with them, I think I can move this motion, can I? No, I would like to ask someone, or no, actually that's not true. I want to make the motion to appoint McKay & Associates as the auditor for our 2021-22 fiscal year.
I'll second it.
Thanks, Sandy.
Is that a conflict?
I think so. I don't know.
Well, just because if you were corrupt, you could work for the corrupt voters. So
Okay, maybe I'll
make the
maybe I'll take it back.
Judith is not corrupt.
I'll make the motion then.
I'll second it.
Thanks.
Was it Heather?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, and can you ask the vote?
Oh, Yes, so could we all take a vote on the motion to accept Mckenna Partners as our auditors?
Add me in.
Thank you, everyone.
The voting system works.
Thank you. Hearing no opposition, we'll assume that the motion is approved. Okay, and thank you very much, Judith. Much appreciated. Okay, I'm going to hand the meeting over to Karen, who's going to organize our board elections. And I'll ask you to take it away, Karen, please.
Okay, so first I'll start out with, can you hear me all right? Is that all right? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll just start with a brief summary of our process. So we did a call out for interest in being on the board, and we do have one person who's interested in running in running for the board, and we also have 9 board members, existing board members, who are seeking re-election. So we also, I'd like everyone to give a brief introduction of themselves so that we can vote. And I think in the order that you're listed on this, on the screen, if people could give that as a short introduction, that would be great. So Bobby Rose.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I was wondering if you could give a brief introduction of who you are, so that before the election.
Well, my name is Bobby Rose Cooey. Untitled Champion for McPherson, and I've been living here in Whitehorse for a number of years. I've done some work with CPAWS in the past, and right now I'm at work and can't be loud. I'm really thankful to be here though. And yeah.
Okay, thanks. And next is Charlotte.
Hi, everyone. My name is Charlotte, and I've been a member of the board since about September. So it hasn't been very long, but I've really enjoyed my time on the board so far and would love to continue to be on the board. I'm a born and raised Yukoner. And yes, I hope that I can get your re-election vote. Thanks.
Thanks, Charlotte. And Eric? Are you there, Eric?
I think you guys are on mute, Eric.
There you go. There you go, Chris. You got it.
I think I'm turned on.
You're unmuted. The person has figured out.
I can hear you now.
Okay, we won't mention who that person is. Anyway, I'm Eric Val. I used to be the president of the Yukon chapter, and what I would like to do is stand for a director's position to help with the transition over the next year or so. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Eric. Heather.
Hi, my name's Heather. I've been with the board for over a year, I think. Maybe it's 2. I'm not sure. But I've really been impressed by this organization. I really like the work that CPAWS staff and Chris have been doing. The board is a fascinating group of people. I'd like to continue working with CPAWS, and I'm actually willing to put my name forward as president. I guess that gets decided after we all get elected. Yeah, so I hope I've been a contribution so far, and would like to take on the challenge of helping out a bit more.
Okay, thanks, Heather. And Jill?
Okay. Yes, I was on the board for 10 years until about 5 years ago, and came back on at the AGM last year, and I'm happy to continue to be involved with CPAWS at the board level.
Okay, thanks, Jill. And now Joel.
Hi, I'm Joel. I've been on the board for a number of years, I think about 120 now. And, and I'm just amazed at the work that this organization has done, the things they've managed to accomplish, and I'd like to continue being whatever small part of that I can be going into the future. Thanks.
Thanks, Joel. And now Matthias.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I joined the board of directors in the spring of 2020. So I've been part of the virtual board, I guess, through COVID. And yeah, I've been enjoying the work, getting updated, getting an inside track, and helping with, you know, here and there with decision making and that sort of thing. So yeah, really excited for another year on the board of directors. And yeah, that's that.
Okay, thanks, Matthias. And Sandy, another longtime board member.
Hello there. I've been on the board just 119 years, so 1 year left to Joel. And so yeah, I've appreciated and felt very privileged to be part of the board, and am willing to sit on the board again if people will have me.
Okay, thanks, Sandy. And Saidi is our new potential board member. So I think I'd be very interested to hear Saidi's introduction. Thanks.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Saidi. First of all, thank you so much for having me here today. It's been really very lovely for me to just sit and listen to all of you and get a kind of insider look at CPAWS work. It is work that I have admired and followed for many years now. I work in comprehensive community planning and community economic development with the First Nation of Nahani. Prior to my career in community planning, I was a wilderness canoe guide for 8 years, and that led me to 3 years experience as a board member on a nonprofit called Deepwater Experiential Education Project. And we work to fund kids who could not otherwise afford it to attend outdoor adventure and outdoor therapy programs. My work as a wilderness guide has just fueled a lifelong passion for conserving wild spaces, so to speak. And time again, I've just been confronted with their unparalleled power, not just for ecological well-being and conservation, but also just for the facilitation of human well-being and human partnership. And so I'm really hoping that I can come on as a board member and contribute to the phenomenal work of CPAWS Yukon.
Thanks, Saidi. So I understand that Wendy is not here at the meeting. Did she by any chance hand something in? If not, she is our current treasurer and a former I'm not even sure what her job title was, but basically general, more than the operations manager. She managed the office manager of CPAWS Yukon, and we definitely like to see her back, I think, on the board.
I think it's been decided that in her absence, we will nominate her to stand as a board member. I do believe that that's the case. She hasn't said otherwise, so we'll have her on as the last person on the slate.
Okay, so that is a full slate of directors, but if there are any other members who would like to put their name forward, you can do so now. And I'll call 3 times for that. First call. Second call. Third call. Okay, so I guess that is our current slate. We can now vote on the slate as a block, and so I guess we can all vote for this. So it's time to say whether you're for or against that. Do we need to put a motion forward for that?
Yes, please.
Okay, is there someone who would call for a motion to elect our current slate?
I'll move to put forward the list that we have as our incoming year directors for CPAWS Yukon.
And I'll second that. It's Matthias.
Great, thanks, Eric and Matthias. And now, please vote for our new board members. So remember, you can click on reactions and vote for the board members.
Okay, I vote yes. I still can't figure it out.
Thanks, Jill.
Okay, we're all good? Okay, hearing no opposition and knowing that we're all good, the motion is carried, and we have our board, which is great. Thank you all for running and committing to be a board member. Okay, we're now at the stage of the agenda. We're getting close to the end. Related to any new business that members might wish to raise at this point in time before we adjourn. So the floor is open to any new matters that members may wish to raise. So hearing none, I think we're at a stage now of the meeting that adjournment is the natural next step. And with that in mind, I'll adjourn this year's annual general meeting. And I'm going to pass the rest of the sessions over to Chris, who is going to coordinate the staff updates.
Sure.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric and Karen.
I'll move up here. Okay, thank you everyone so much. Oh, thank you so much for being with us as we've gone through the formal proceedings for this evening. One of the things we found in previous AGMs is that this is the bit, the informal bit, is the bit that people find really the most helpful, because this is where you get to hear from the team about the work that they're doing, and you get kind of the inside scoop of what's going on around CPAWS. So for those of you who need to leave at this point, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Thank you so much for being a member. But I hope most of you can stick around and get some of the updates directly from the team here. And so I believe the first update we have is from Joe T and Anne, our community outreach team.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks everyone who's sticking around. I'll keep it short and sweet. I'm going to do a bit of the talking at the beginning here on behalf of the outreach team. My name is Joe T. Overdoin, and I'm a settler here in the beautiful lands of the Tonquichan Council and Quanland Dun First Nation, and I have the honor to also work closely with many Yukon and transboundary First Nations across the north. And I've been at CPAWS since 2011, and then took a break in 2015 when I became a mom, and then returned in 2017, returned to a whole new crew. And not too long after that, CPAWS continued to grow and grow, and the outreach team went from one person to now double. And I just wanted to acknowledge that, as someone who's been here for a while, just how much we've grown as an organization. When I first came, we basically worked exclusively on the Peel Watershed campaign, which I was honored to be a part of. And now as the outreach team, we are so fortunate to be able to work in so many of the campaigns, and with so many of the team, with all of the team members here. So I know, I can speak for myself, and I think Anne as well, and saying that we love that about our jobs. And it's hard to pinpoint exactly, outreach team did this, this, and this, and you're going to hear very soon from others about the specific campaigns. But I can tell you that, this year, that looking back was very different for us. So the outreach team were, when Anne joined the outreach team, not too long after she started, we basically toured the Peel communities together and lived together in various places, towing my 3-year-old along. That is where we like to focus our time and energy, and this year was different. And so we adapted to that, and I think adapted to that really well. We also, as Anne spoke to in her introduction to the reconciliation commitment, that has also been a really big part of our work in this team. And I'm really honored to work with Anne Meese. And she mentioned the reconciliation training that we took in 2019, but to be honest, Anne and I had conversations about these topics for hours long in our office before ever taking that training. And Anne, her whole life, has been living and breathing those topics. From the time that she was the mother of young kids to then studying those topics even more deeply in university. And so Anne brings a huge wealth of knowledge and experience to our team, and a real openness that I think I could say we're all really grateful for. So just looking ahead, we have we're hopeful that things can continue to shift for the outreach team, and that eventually we can get back into physically being in the communities. One other thing that's really on our team's minds and hearts is regional land use planning, and that's something that we would like to make sure that communities know we can support with, especially in advance of the actual planning itself, to help communities come together, to provide that support in organizing gatherings and times for people to come together and really think about the vision in advance of such a huge undertaking. And that's something that both Anne and I have been working on with the help of Asad, who's been going through the archives and looking at all the work that went into the Peel, not just by CPAWS, but by all the First Nation communities. So I'm going to quickly pass it over to Anne and Asad and sign off, because there's quite a few more updates to come. So I don't want to take up too much more time, but thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, I don't have a whole lot to add to that, Jody, but thanks for your kind words. And yeah, we had to really adjust our way of approaching community outreach, since we couldn't be in the communities. But what we've been able to do is connect closer with all of the Yukon First Nations through email. So that's been working quite well. So we've been in touch with more First Nations that way than not being able to go into the communities. So I just want to say, along with the reconciliation document, we also created another document that we call Working Alongside First Nations. So this document gives a general overall history of Yukon First Nations, as well as a breakdown of each of the 14 Yukon First Nations. So I think all of the staff and the board have seen that paper, and it's a living document that's going to be updated as we learn and grow with Yukon First Nation people. So thanks.
Thank you, Jyoti Ann, and Jyoti, Ann, not Jyoti -Ann. This is Asachishti. My pronouns are he, him, they, them. And I guess officially my title is Junior Digital Archivist. But I was a volunteer here before that. And yeah, I think there's so much that has been said that I echo, and other things that haven't been said, such as how so many of the staff members here have lost grandparents and have been grieving all sorts of things and what have you. But yeah, I just wanted to thank Judith and Chris for supporting this project, because I started off as a volunteer because I accidentally ended up at the Peel Regional Land Use Agreement being signed in Mayo, and was just astounded and amazed by, oh wow, there's really something here, and there's only there are certain ways that it can be told, this story, this narrative, and there are certain ways that it will be told. And so, John Etienne, who was a staff here a few years ago, he had done a great job, inventorying what became the Peel campaign, what is the Peel campaign in terms of paper, and mostly paper and files and correspondences and photo slides and CDs and even hard drives. And, as all of you know, so much of this work is relationship based and so intangible, but we procured a scanner. I've been digitizing everything. We've had professional archivists who've actually gone to school for this and have years and years of experience helping us appraise, the value of certain things, whether they're worth keeping or what to do with that. And it's been really an incredible, both sort of revelation and reminder of how much things change and how much things don't. And, I think fundamentally, as an archivist, as an organization, we're very lucky, about the community development funding, because I think what's going on both on a larger scale as well as for us is just like figuring out how do we remember, right? And I think that's what calls to action or what have you is memory. Memory is an important tool, and I think part of the reconciliation statement, process, commitment, which is ongoing, living, breathing. So yeah, it's been a treat, and I hope to have more updates for you on this by the end of the summer when my term position is up. Thank you all so much.
Hey, I'm Malcolm. I'm the campaigns coordinator. Chris touched upon the success that we had advocating to Canadian banks for them not to fund drilling in the Arctic Refuge. So I'll skip over that part. But even with the bank campaign aside, it's been a really eventful year for the Arctic Refuge. Going back to this time last year, it was the final year of the Trump administration. Ever since late 2017, when the Arctic Refuge was open to oil and gas leasing through the tax overhaul, the Trump administration had been racing to complete its environmental review to authorize a lease sale in the Arctic Refuge. And then in August of last year, they finalized that environmental review, and that kickstarted the series of events that led to them holding a lease sale on January 6th of this year. And the lease sale itself was a pretty massive embarrassment for the US government. There were no major oil companies that showed up. There was only one minor oil company that bid on leases. And the primary bidder was the state of Alaska through its export and development corporation. And the lack of interest from the fossil fuel industry, I think, speaks to the huge amount of work that's been done over the last 4 years and over the last 4 decades to stand up for the Arctic Refuge, especially from Witching communities, and more recently through campaigning around banks and financial institutions to get them to promise not to fund drilling in the Arctic Refuge, so that to send a signal that even if the company did get leases, that they might not ever get the funding that they would actually need to build the oil field in the Arctic Refuge. And then the fate of the Arctic Refuge looked a lot rosier after January 20th. Within a few hours of his inauguration, President Biden signed an executive order to put a hold on the oil and gas leasing program. And then just a few weeks ago, the US Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, released a secretarial order that suspended all the leases that the Trump administration sold, pending a complete review of the program. So throughout the environmental review that the Trump administration was doing, we kept on saying again and again that this is not a legitimate review. They're ignoring key ecological and cultural implications of drilling in the Arctic Refuge. So this new review hopefully will be the chance to do the work that the previous administration didn't do. And as we said all along, like a thorough review of oil drilling in the Arctic Refuge can come to no other conclusion that drilling in the Arctic Refuge is a terrible idea. That aside, the law that originally opened the Arctic Refuge is still on the books, and our allies in the United States are working really hard to try to get a legislative solution to that, working with allies in the Senate and in the House of Representatives in the hopes of passing legislation that will undo that provision from the 2017 tax bill, which will provide a much greater level of protection for the Arctic Refuge. So yeah, there's lots of work left to do, but I think we're all feeling really good about how we've all weathered the last 4 years without a single piece of oil machinery touching the Arctic Refuge, and I think that's a pretty amazing win. I guess the last thing that I'd like to point out is that Laurie Nitro, who is an elder with the Untitled and has been a long-standing advocate for the Arctic Refuge, was the recipient of the Glenn Davis Conservation Award last month. And it's amazing recognition for her work on the Arctic Refuge, and she's an incredibly deserving recipient of the award, and we are all really fortunate to get to work with her on this campaign.
Okay, great. My name is Randy and I'm conservation manager with CPAWS. I've been here since 2017. I started off as a conservation coordinator, and Megan is now in that role and really making that role her own. And I'm excited for her update. And well, I think that really speaks to all staff at CPAWS. Everyone here just really takes their role and runs with it. And it's pretty amazing to see. And it feels weird to be updating campaigns because it's always such a group update or a group effort. My notes aren't as organized as I'd like. I just got back from a trip home. So I'm winging it a little bit, but if I miss anything, staff, please jump in. While I was away, my partner did a bit of redecorating. So I either have a goose or a bison horn attached to my head. So I'll have to get a new Zoom background. So the Dawson Land Use Plan has been one of our quieter campaigns. This plan started in 2010, it ran until 2014, and then it was put on hold because of the PL shenanigans. It got restarted in 2019 and a little bit delayed because of COVID, but as of tomorrow, the commission is releasing the draft plan. So that's a pretty big milestone for this plan. So stay tuned for how that looks. Of course, the Dawson plan has such a different flavor to it than the PL. You know, a lot of people think Dawson and they think mining and especially placer mining, but the region is obviously so much more than that. You know, it stretches all the way north to Fishing Branch and down to the Tetondic Mountains, where Malcolm has actually gone and done a photo journey. And, you know, almost far below the confluence of the White River and the Yukon River. And, you know, really our tagline for the campaign is just, there's so many types of gold in the Dawson region, from arnica to warblers to these golden landscapes that we all know in the Tombstone region in the fall. So far with this campaign, we've been disappointed with Yukon government that they've done a really minor staking withdrawal. I know that was a big fight with the PL to get a moratorium on staking during planning, and finally years into the process, they put in a moratorium. It was the day before, no, sorry, I think hours before the election was called, Yukon government put in a staking moratorium for 12% of the region, or 17%, including Tombstone. And, you know, so claims and development applications are proceeding as planning is going on. And it's just not, you know, it doesn't respect other land uses. To me, it doesn't respect the promise of co-management under the umbrella final agreement. And so we hope to see future withdrawals, and we hope to see a plan where there is a strong commitment to conservation, and tomorrow we'll know more. And I guess you can see on the screen, because of that lack of a land withdrawal, Art Webster, the vice chair, resigned from the Planning Commission. So it's a concern shared by many, and including Trundle-Quitchin. And there will be a great piece by Lori Fox. She wrote about the Dawson Land Use Plan that's in the Narwhal. It's online now, but we'll be posting it on Facebook tomorrow. And it gives a really good primer on the Dawson region and the issues with the lack of a withdrawal, but also some of the promise. And I think, you know, we haven't seen this draft plan yet, but hopefully there's some promising conservation areas within it. Okay, actually, that's me again. So last fall, we participated in the Yukon Water Board public interest hearing on placer mining and wetlands, and that was prompted by Trundle-Quitchin calling on the Water Board to do this public hearing with really two questions at its heart of, you know, should placer mining be allowed in wetlands, and if we're going to allow placer mining in wetlands, under what conditions. And it was really prompted by the situation in the Indian River watershed, which happens to be in the Dawson region, where almost 100% of the wetlands are staked and at risk of mining. And there's, you can see on the slide, this footage of just this landscape with this checkerboard of transformation and disturbance, and how that's changed hydrology and wildlife movement and the species that are out there, and then how people relate to and feel about that landscape. And there was really powerful testimony at that hearing from First Nations. There was other conservation organizations who spoke, including Yukon Conservation Society, and also the mining industry was there. And we've been waiting on a What We Heard report from that public hearing. It was supposed to be out this spring. It looks like it's delayed. The Water Board will be using that hearing to influence their policies. And because of this hearing, the wetland policy that Yukon government has been working on for a long time and CPAWS has been involved in was put on pause. We are expecting it. I believe there's I don't know if there's a platform promise, a campaign promise, or if it's on the Yukon, the Liberal NDP supply agreement, that it'll be a year, hopefully before, no more than a year until that policy is out. So we'll see. And I think I'm going to hand it over to you, Malcolm, to speak to the film.
Last summer, we were able to do a short canoe trip down the Indian River, which flows through the heart of the the Klondike goldfields, with 3 young women from the Toronto-Quechin First Nation. And I brought my camera and my journal along and made a short film about the trip. Some of you may have seen it. We had a couple screenings back in February during the outreach period around the mineral development strategy. But we're planning on doing like a full public release this summer and fall to coincide with the release of the draft Dawson land use plan, and to help elevate some of the issues that the plan is grappling with. So stay tuned for that. And it was, it felt like a really timely trip because it's a river that really embodies so many of the issues that the Yukon is struggling with right now around placer mining in wetlands, around the Dawson land use plan, and also with how mining is regulated, with looking ahead towards coming up with new mining laws.
Okay, I'll jump in again. Of course, I love all the campaigns that we are involved in. They're also important. This one just holds a very special place in my heart. Many of you know the proposed ATAC road in the Beaver River watershed. That was a 65-kilometer exploration road that the First Nation of Mckenna was really concerned, and many others were concerned, would open up that watershed to hard rock mining and placer mining. And so because of that, Yukon government put in a sub-regional planning process with the First Nation. And we're still waiting on a draft plan to be released. As part of working with the First Nation, it was 2 years ago, we did our first trip into the watershed. And that started off as just an idea really linked to looking back in the archives and seeing the trips that CPAWS had done. And then that idea blossomed into a bit of a trip with Joel Lewitt actually on our board saying that sure, he would guide that trip. And we repeated that last summer in 2020. And it was amazing. It was able to come together with COVID, but everyone just sort of rallied, and we headed out into the watershed. Bobby Rose on our board was one of our guides. And as Chris said, we lost one of our guides the day before the trip, and Adil, our communications coordinator, it was that afternoon, a 14-day trip that he volunteered to go and to do filming in Calder's Place. And so I think that speaks a lot to Adil and just to the rest of the team of just making things happen. It's pretty incredible. And I think day 2, he found himself going down backwards down the river, trying to avoid a sweeper, and just really rallying. That trip last year was a youth trip really focused on, outdoor and leadership skills. And Bobby Rose brought such a depth to that trip. I'm really grateful she was able to guide that trip. And it wasn't a very promising start. I was watching the youth learn to paddle on Clark Lakes, and it was very zigzaggy. And I was a little bit worried what we'd gotten them into. And then the last day, the same youth were in the stern, and they were paddling us into shore to Mayo, and their women's drumming group was, drumming us into shore, and the community was welcoming us with signs. And, as Chris said, we got plopped into a parade and paraded around the community. And it was just probably one of the most powerful experiences I've been fortunate enough to be part of. We have a film from that trip that we're hoping to premiere at Nashonaktang's General Assembly this week because of COVID. Not sure what that's looking like. Adil and I will not be heading to Mayo because of that, but we will hopefully having that film out soon. In the fall, ATAC Resources, that exploration company, they did something I would call, I don't know, sneaky, disrespectful. The road really was meant to wait until the land use plan was complete. And they instead decided to try to amend their Class 3 quartz mining license, something that is not subject to public scrutiny. And so they tried to amend their exploration license to have a 65-kilometer road tacked onto it. Fortunately, Yukon government said no. I've read through their decision, and it's really well reasoned. It talks about reconciliation. It talks about potential impacts on wildlife and how this is not anywhere near an amendment. But I do think that if there wasn't the same level of scrutiny on this watershed and on this road, that decision could have gone the other way if there was political pressure. And so just very thankful that Yukon government did not rubber stamp that amendment. If you're interested, there's a Yukon News piece a while ago that I wrote that goes into more detail on that. And this year, exciting things, we have another trip into the Beaver River watershed. It's just a very meaningful way to connect with citizens from Nashonaktang. And so this time is going to be Jyoti, and it'll be Bobby Rose, and looks like Saidi as well from our board will be getting to venture out. So I'm very happy for them.
Hi everyone, I'm Megan McCaw. I'm the conservation coordinator. Last summer I started out as the conservation intern with CPAWS. So as the intern, I got to choose a research project, and I decided to look at the biodiversity of Mcintyre Creek. That kind of evolved into a larger project where I kind of explored the many values of Mcintyre Creek, which is a creek system that flows through the heart of Whitehorse, and it serves as a wildlife corridor. And it has many cultural and social values tied to the area as well. So I produced a report called The Story of Mcintyre Creek. And yeah, I ended up getting a bit of an extension on my contract with CPAWS, and then I became the conservation coordinator. So that was pretty exciting for me, having just graduated from my environmental science degree a year ago. And then over the winter, this work at Mcintyre Creek turned into a campaign. So we've been working closely with Ton Quechan Council and Kwanlin Dun First Nation, trying to incorporate that cultural lens, and also making sure that we're respecting their wishes for the area. And through some of the conversations we've had with others that value the area, and through the work I did last summer, we realized that what was really missing for Mcintyre Creek is a study of the wildlife corridor and how human activity influences how wildlife use the area. So last summer I did a small amount of camera trapping. That's the photo of the lynx you see there. And yeah, I got a lot of coyotes and a few other, a porcupine, I believe. It's kind of a few mystery photos. So this summer we decided to turn that into a much larger study, and we're getting some guidance from Daniel Yip, who's an independent researcher. So we're doing a large camera trapping program throughout the whole watershed, and we're also using autonomous recording units to record birdsong throughout the whole area. And then we're working with Yukon government as well on a study looking at how bats use Mcintyre Creek. So hopefully all of this information can be used to assess how the wildlife patterns overlap with the various human activities and different types of development in the area. And our hope is that that information can be used for planning for the region. That park has been proposed for Mcintyre Creek. And at this point, we're kind of just presenting the information or finding information and presenting it to decision makers, because we've heard from Kwantlen Dun First Nation that they're reluctant to just jump into protecting really specific areas like this before they're able to look at broader land use planning. So they like to take a more strategic approach, and of course we respect that. So right now we're just gathering information and making sure that what we're doing is as helpful as possible. I'll just point out one of the photos here. This photo on the upper right was from a couple weeks ago when Preet, our intern this summer, and myself and Scott Gilbert from the Yukon College were out setting up cameras, and we got caught in a downpour and got completely drenched. So it's been kind of an adventurous few weeks of getting our equipment out, and yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Okay, so the mineral development strategy, it is a campaign with huge promise. You know, there still is such an opportunity to reform mining in the Yukon, and because of that, it was a very serious campaign, but at the same time, it was a really fun campaign because it was sort of an all hands on deck sort of campaign, and those are the most fun, where we can all be brainstorming and all just be in our absolute element. And it's really the campaign where we figured out how to campaign during COVID. There was public engagement that started, I think, in May or June, and then it went throughout the summer. And that's where we figured out how to do our first webinar, which seems so simple now, but I remember Adele and I scratching our heads trying to figure out the technology. And Anne and Jyoti really figured out community outreach during this time. And Malcolm with his graphics, it was just so critical that we had a really strong web presence. And I'm really proud of the work that we did. It's hard to have a campaign over something called the Mineral Development Strategy. It sounds so jargony. The draft strategy came out in December, and there were some really promising things in it. An emphasis on land use planning, and the promise of successor legislation that aligns with protecting the environment, that aligns with the final agreements and Aboriginal rights and UNDRIP, and certainly some weaknesses as well, just some wonky recommendations in it, not really going far enough, sort of stopping at acknowledging Aboriginal rights and UNDRIP, but not really pushing far enough into implementation. And so we let the panel know that. And unfortunately, the final strategy was fairly similar to the draft. It's not the worst document I've ever seen, but we didn't see the change between the draft and the final that we'd hoped. But I think the promise with this process was the process itself. There's so many groups that came together, so many conservation organizations, so many First Nations who on the record said things have to change. You can go to the MDS website and read through, you know, the dozens of documents that say that, and people voice that out loud. And I think now people expect that things will change. And we have positive news that, you know, even though we're disappointed in parts of the strategy, John Stryker, the new Minister of Energy, Mines and Resources, has been really clear in the legislature that Yukon government isn't going to take this thing and just, you know, adopt it en masse. It's going to be government to government consultation and conversations with First Nations. And so I think we're going to see a lot of long overdue changes come from this strategy. And the biggest one being new mining legislation. So we know Yukon government has made a commitment, a very ambitious commitment to complete successor legislation within this term. I don't think they're going to make it, but it's nice to see that they have that commitment in there and that they're putting a lot of resources and thought into that.
Thanks, Randy. This is where I get to do my one update. It's not very often these days that I get to lead campaigns. And so it was really nice to be able to get my teeth sunk into the election campaign earlier this year. I won't speak on this too long. I'm just conscious of time. But I will say it was a really fun campaign to work on. We partnered with the Yukon Conservation Society on this work, as we always do every election. And the goal was to run a nonpartisan campaign that would ensure that the environment was a big part of the election. I really think the team did an incredible job. We were thinking about the election for many months and sort of planning for an election because we knew it was going to be coming. And then all of a sudden, just like that, it dropped. And we were both way behind where we needed to be, but also ahead of where we could have been if we hadn't been talking about it and planning it for months. And so the whole team came together for this and just did an incredible job. Within the short period of time, we organized an election forum. We managed to get platform commitments on the record. We created our own platform recommendations, which we distributed to every party. We funded polling. We had a door hanger sent out once again to every household in the territory saying, I'm voting wild. And we created a website. And so again, this was a huge team effort to get all of this done within roughly 3 weeks, because the last week of the election was not really usable time anymore. And so we had to just work really, really hard and get that done. The evidence again was that it was a success. Election polling showed that environment was once again one of the biggest issues of the election. For interesting Liberal Party voters in particular, it was their biggest election issue, according to polling. We also commissioned some polling, as we've already spoken about. It's something we've been talking about doing for a long time. We know that previously CPAWS has commissioned election polling and on the Peel watershed and found the results really helpful. So we've been talking about it for a long time, but we've wanted to wait for the right time to do that, where we could really have a huge amount of influence. Unfortunately, the results came to us the day after the election closed. And so we might have missed the boat on it being the most influential, but it was still really, really helpful. And it's something that we're going to be able to use to drive the government in our government relations throughout this term. Because what we saw once again is that Yukoners are incredibly supportive of the environment and incredibly supportive of the positions that we have as an organization. I mean, we see somewhere between 75 and 80% of people agreeing with pretty much every one of our positions. And trying to get 75 to 80% of Yukoners to agree on anything is pretty much impossible. So the fact that our issues are the ones that they've actually chosen to agree on, I think that just shows the strength of the environmental movement here. It shows the connection that First Nations people have with the land, with wildlife, and it shows that that wildlife, land, and water are just incredibly valued here in the Yukon. And it was a thrill to be able to get my hands dirty on this campaign and work with the team again. Yeah, just had a lot of fun, and I think we got some great results.
Hi, so yeah, my name is Preet and I'm the conservation intern this summer. And so I'm really thankful to be able to be in this position. I think that it'll be a lot of great experience for me in the future. Yeah, so I've grown up in the Yukon. I was born and raised, and I'm really lucky to have the kind of exposure that I've had to the outdoors. And I think that that has kind of really contributed to my character. And so, yeah, I'm excited to work with CPAWS and learn more about conservation and preserving the environment. And I think that through COVID, at least not only myself, and I'm sure many other people have realized that in the end, like the outdoors is really something that we all have. It kind of unites us, and find it something that we should cherish. And so, yeah, I currently will be going into my third year of my undergraduate at Queen's University in Kingston with an environmental studies and geography degree. So this summer, I've been helping out with Megan in the Mckentyre Creek campaign, setting up like ARUs and cameras, and it's been a really great experience so far, despite the rain. I think that it's been fun. Also a great learning opportunity. I'm also hoping to team up with YCS on making like a booklet or a pamphlet that would be a self-guided hike kind of for parents and their kids. And I thought that would be a great way to encourage people to get out and explore Mcintyre Creek for themselves and learn about the area and see why it's an important place. Yeah, and so I'm also hoping to work with a local biologist looking at bee populations in the creek. So I guess I'll be busy. And yay, so we have the fireweed market running. Woohoo! Hopefully that'll be next week, or sorry, not next week, on Thursday, this Thursday. So if everything goes well, maybe I'll see some of you guys there. But yeah, so it'll be a busy summer. And I'm looking forward to working with everybody.
Well, that's all of our business for tonight. We have a chance to have a little bit of open discussion if anyone wants to chime in. Otherwise, at some point, we can close things for the evening.
Those were fabulous updates. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, really enjoyed hearing what everybody is up to and just hearing the passion in all of your voices. It's very inspiring and well done.
Thanks, Jill.
Yeah.
Great.
And also wanting to thank Eric and Karen for all of her years, and Eric for the great job both Karen and Eric have done over the years. Very.
Thank you, Jill. Big footsteps to fill after you left.
Yeah,
Okay.
good.
Great job.
Thanks for all your great work.
Thank Lewis as an honorary staff member. Get a lot of support from him.
And Chris, you too. Thank you so much for the amazing job you've been doing for all these years now.
It's all just the great team. I just take the glory, and I'm happy to do so because I'm surrounded by such great people.
You have a little bit to do with the successes, just a little.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And everyone who's on the board. I noticed a number of people have left, so I wonder if we should just reconvene to do an election of the executive. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, with that, how about we close this meeting? Thank you to our board, and thank you to the team. We're all really lucky to be surrounded by such wonderful people.
Great job, everyone. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.
Yes.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, and thanks to Linda as well, the one person who's still here who's not staff or board. Bye, Linda.
Thank you, guys. Be safe.
Yeah. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye now.